Hey, Kelly Staggs here, American Irrigator, trying to make you a better irrigator. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about a simple drip installation for some raised planters we did that are going to be for a garden. Now, the landscaping crew built these raised planters that turned out really nice. They used a stack block, put a cap on them, and filled them with some good sandy loam type of topsoil. And they also mixed in some peat moss type soil mixture in there as well. And it's turned out really good. And so it's really a good way to do some raised planters, and you can use these for any kind of thing. But this guy, this customer, he's gonna plant his garden type stuff in these raised planters. So then now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna put some drip in here, and we've got it on its own zone. We've got the stub ups already put in, and I'm gonna use drip that we use in just any type of bed planting area. The drip we use is a 17mm size, which is basically like a 1/2 inch. The emitters in this drip are gonna be every 12 inches, and they put out 0.9 gallons an hour. So here's the drip that I like to use. It's a Rainbird drip. You can see it's XFD drip line, 0.9, and the 12 is 12-inch spacing. This particular roll is 250 feet of this drip. And you can see it's like a 1/2 inch, but they call it 17mm, typical size. And this little dot right here, that's where the emitter is. But here's our emitters, and they come every 12 inches. And so the spacing we'll use on this drip will be 12 inches. And so that's just kind of a typical and usual drip type that everybody uses, and it works really well. So in this planter, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna grid this thing out. And so we'll go all the way around the edge, and we'll use 2 or 3 different lines down through the middle. And we're gonna do every single one of these. We've got 3 of them to do, and every one of them will do just that same way. Now we've got our stub up here that I'm gonna tie onto, and I'm gonna use this fitting here. It's just a 1/2 inch. We've got a 1/2 inch line. I'll tell you why I used 1/2 inch here in a second. But I've got a 1/2 inch elbow that's threaded. And so it's threaded on this inside. So I've got my drip male adapter that's 1/2 inch threaded, and you just thread that in there. Some guys like to use Teflon right here. I typically don't use Teflon on these threads, mainly because this isn't under pressure all the time. It's only going to be under pressure when the system is running, and the pressure is not going to be that much. And so if this does leak any at all, which usually they don't, I mean, when you really tighten down on it, it actually seals off pretty good. But even if it did leak a little bit, it's just gonna be water in the planter just like your drip anyway. It's nothing wrong with putting Teflon on these threaded fittings like you would your other ones. I just typically don't, because if it leaks a little bit, I don't usually worry about it. Now these beds are 5 feet by 10 feet as far as the inside of here. And so I'm gonna have probably 5 rows of drip that are 10 feet long. Well, 5 times 10 is 50 feet. I'm gonna have 50 feet of drip. Now, if I did the calculation, and I know that this drip is 0.9 gallons an hour, I can figure out how many gallons a minute that I'm gonna be running through this. And it actually ends up not being very much, surprisingly. But my 1/2 inch pipe can flow, keeping my flow and my velocity under 5 feet per second, which is what you want to do. I can do 6 gallons a minute through this 1/2 inch. Well, we're going to be barely at, I think it was 1 gallon a minute. Yeah, it's actually just 0.75 gallons a minute, not even 1 gallon a minute. And so my 1/2 inch stub up is plenty, and it's going to work out good for this situation. So now I'm just going to take my fitting, I'm going to dig this out a little bit, and we're going to glue this on. Now, as far as the height of where I'm going to put this, I want this part of the fitting is going to be facing out this way, and I want it to just be ground level here. And if it's a little ground level or a little bit below is good. You don't want it sticking way up out of the ground. And this dirt is actually going to settle a little bit, so I'm going to put it a little bit below. But I'll set it here and I'll kind of figure out my height. Now these cutters right here, they're blazing, and I think it's the, if I remember right, it's King Innovations that makes these, but don't quote me on that, but end up liking these. I use these kind of cutters to cut my PVC, cut the drip line. I like using these, they work really well. You always want to hold it just a few seconds, 30 seconds max, and you're good. Wipe off any excess. Now, once I get tied into this with my drip, then I'll cover it up and smooth this all out. Now to get my drip line started here, is I've started here and I've just stapled it, put an elbow in, stapled it down. Here's where I'm gonna have my other tees, my other fittings, and then I went down straight. And one thing with this drip, each emitter is gonna put out a foot type circle. And so I usually come off any edge about 6 inches in, and then 6 inches from this side, and then we'll space it, about a foot apart on this inside here. So coming off this edge about 6 inches is a good way to do this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back about 6 inches from this end, cut this, and then I'm going to go ahead and put this line in and put all of these other tees in. And every one of these fittings, we'll put a staple in to hold it down. Now let's just fill it in and grit it out. Another thing I wanted to mention was on my staples, I'm putting them about, every foot and a half, every 2 feet. And you might want to even put more. I wouldn't go more than 2 feet because your drip's going to end up just going up and down. So to keep it down level and flat and tight, I usually go about every 2 feet or so. Now we'll tie in our stub up to our drip. Now there's several different ways you can irrigate this kind of garden raised planter area. I like doing it like this because I like to think about watering the entire area. Doing a drip-like system like this, evenly spaced out, you can water this entire area and treat it as just an area instead of thinking about point source where you're just trying to water each individual plant. Now, which is also a good way to do it. And something you can do is you can plug in different emitters. If you know you've got a seed or a plant right here and you want to give it a little bit more water than the other area, you can plug in other emitters into this drip and it's going to work just fine. But I like to always think in watering an area, and so this right here is going to water this area evenly, and it's going to water it really good, which is going to work for any type of plants that they put into this planter. 1 down, 3 to go. Now let's turn it on and check it, because what do I always say? Always check your work. One thing we did have on this zone already is we've got a filter, and it's kind of buried here. We've got a pressure regulator too that's going to regulate the pressure of this zone from right here to 30 psi. So a good thing to have on your drip system is a filter and a pressure regulator. I have some other videos about the pressure regulators and filters for your drip system. You can go check those out on our channel. All right, seems to be working pretty good. All right, they're all working. Starting to look good. Now you might have the question of how long am I supposed to run this drip system? Well, this particular drip, 12-inch spacing, 0.9 gallons per hour, is gonna put about an inch, 1.4, almost an inch and a half inches of water per hour. And so if your target precipitation rate is to put down maybe an inch and a half a week, you would run this drip at least an hour throughout the week. Now that might be 2 different times at 30 minutes. It might be 3 different times at 20 minutes. However often you need to run it, keep all the soil wet and good for your plants, is what you can do. But this is going to put down about 1.5 inches per hour. And so you can split it up however you need to split it up. Now we're going to have to run this quite a bit to get all of the moisture we need to before he starts planting this in this soil, because it's dry soil right now. So we're going to run it quite a bit, maybe even every day for the next couple days, maybe 30 minutes or so for 2 or 3 days, get all of the moisture we need in there, and then he can back off and run it maybe twice a week for 30 minutes, and it'll keep this bed area wet. And then you just want to look at it and check it. Don't just set it and forget it. That's one of the problems that we have in a lot of irrigation systems. People set it and forget it. You want to check this stuff. You want to turn it on periodically, make sure there's nothing broke, but also check the soil. If it's soaking wet, then you're watering too much. But if it's looking dry, you might want to bump the time up or water an extra day or something like that. And that's how to just do a simple drip system in a raised planter. I hope this helps you guys.